Coming up next on the Holistic Wealth Podcast.
I know that for her, it never came easy. She was actually a child who suffered from epilepsy 5 years during her life, never went to school for those 5 years, and watched her parents spend every dime on her health. Some of her siblings couldn't even go to school because of her. So she grew up with a lot of guilt around money and what her parents had to do for her. So, she has that money tendency, which is the anxious spender profile. And if you do take the personal financial identities quiz on the Institute on Holistic Wealth, then you'll see what your financial identity is.
You're listening to the Holistic Wealth Podcast with host Keisha Blair, author of Holistic Wealth and founder of the Institute on Holistic Wealth. And now, here's your host, Keisha Blair.
Welcome to the Holistic Wealth Podcast, and I'm your host, Keisha Blair. It's 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. It's amazing that we're already in 2025. I'm wishing you all the best. Lots of holistic wealth in 2025 for you and your family, your loved ones. I am so honored to be here with you for the very first podcast episode of 2025. And our topic is Holistic Wealth is the New Generational Wealth. Here's how to embrace it in 2025. It's such an important one to start the new year with. It's amazing how much this concept of holistic wealth has been growing. The holistic wealth movement is growing worldwide, and I'm sure that in 2025, it's going to grow even more. Now, before I get into this episode, I just want to state that the Holistic Wealth Podcast is sponsored by the Institute on Holistic Wealth, and you can visit the website for a range of courses and resources to embrace and to grow your holistic wealth journey. And we should all do that. And of course, the signature program is the Certified Holistic Wealth Consultant Program, and the other two programs that are so beneficial and critical for this topic that we're talking about, for generational wealth and holistic wealth being the new generational wealth, is the Certified Trauma of Money Consultant Program, as it addresses trauma writ large, not just money trauma, but trauma writ large, as well as the Holistic Healing Certification Program. We've been hearing from students how groundbreaking that is in their lives and transformational. So check out those programs there. And again, welcome everyone. If you're listening in to the Holistic Wealth Podcast, I just want to introduce myself again to you. I'm Keisha Blair, founder of the Global Holistic Wealth Movement. I am the author of the series, Holistic Wealth series of books. I'm an economist. I am founder of the Institute on Holistic Wealth. Of course, I host the Holistic Wealth Podcast. I also founded Global Holistic Wealth Day that is celebrated April 9th every year around the world. I'm so excited to kick off the new year with this groundbreaking conversation. Holistic wealth is the new wealth, because we've all heard the term and we hear it more and more every single day. Generational wealth. We hear it thrown around in discussions about legacy, family, financial planning. But today I'm here to tell you why holistic wealth is the new generational wealth and why it's time to embrace it in 2025. Now, if you go back to the first podcast episode of 2024, I think it's a great episode to then link back to this. I'll put that link in the show notes so that you can listen to that one and then listen to this one. Of course, feel free to share this episode with your friends. It's such a crucial one to kickstart the year. And as we go through this episode will be in two parts. As you go through this, you'll realize why I decided to kickstart the new year with this comprehensive episode. So let's start by defining generational wealth. So generational wealth traditionally refers to the assets, property, and financial resources that are passed down from one generation to the next. It's normally about ensuring that future generations have financial security. But here's the problem. While generational wealth focuses on material assets, it often overlooks the unseen, right? It focuses on material assets, but not on the other critical aspects that also get passed down with the financial wealth. And guess what? Even as I stated in the book, Holistic Wealth, By the second or the third generation, guess what? All of that wealth fizzles away because guess what? We've ignored the foundation. We've ignored emotional well-being. We've ignored instilling good money habits. And so just as impactful is the inheritance of trauma, which is also passed down, unhealthy patterns, which is often passed down, emotional burdens, which is often passed down. And in our pursuit of financial legacy, we've neglected to address something just as critical: the state of our nervous systems, our mental health, and our emotional resilience. So why is holistic wealth the new generational wealth? I'll tell you why I'm saying this bold statement. Holistic wealth is such a crucial concept. When I pioneered the term holistic wealth and the concept in my book and in the work that I've been doing through this podcast, The Institute, I defined it as the ability to build wealth in every aspect of your life: financial, emotional, spiritual, and social. So holistic wealth is about living with intention. And I said this in the book, I'll say it again. Holistic wealth is living intentionally by design. And it's leaving a legacy that isn't just measured in dollars and cents, but in the emotional well-being, resilience, and health of the next generation. So let me say this boldly. Holistic wealth is the antidote to the generational passing down of unresolved trauma, nervous system dysregulation, stress, burnout, and anxiety has become a hallmark of modern society, especially in a world clamoring for money and material success. We've created a culture where financial inheritance often comes at the expense of our emotional health, which spells disaster, and it spells some of the other epidemics like the loneliness epidemic, this growth in suicide among teens and young people that we're seeing. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death among teenagers. And I said this in a previous podcast episode about the teen mental health crisis, because guess what? We're passing down lesions. We're passing down unregulated nervous systems, stress, unhealthy habits, and we have to kind of reverse that. We have to be conscious that we have to start reversing that trend. Now let's talk about nervous system dysregulation and the hidden cost of wealth building. Here's a sobering statistic. According to the American Psychological Association, 76% of Americans report experiencing physical symptoms of stress regularly. Chronic stress doesn't just affect individuals, it is also passed down through generations. So while we're doing our estate planning, and I'm getting to that in part two of this episode, we're talking about the financial piece of generational wealth, which is critical. While you're thinking of passing down your legacy and your assets, think of what else you're passing down. And also think of passing down not only emotional resilience, but a regulated nervous system. Let's talk about trauma. Research shows that trauma can be transmitted intergenerationally through epigenetic changes, meaning that the stress responses of parents can shape the DNA of their children. Let that sink in for a moment. And if you go back to an earlier Holistic Wealth podcast episode where I spoke about epigenetics and I interviewed, an expert, she's unbelievably talented. You can go back and I'll put the episode in the show notes in terms of epigenetics and trauma. You'll see that you can go back and, listen to that episode in addition to this one. So if a parent spends their life chasing financial wealth at the expense of their mental health, they're not just passing down money, they're passing down a legacy of nervous system dysregulation. And it's unbelievable that the conversation around generational wealth does not include this. And that's why I have a responsibility to also bring this to the fore, because these are the conversations that we need to be having. Remember that podcast episode where I spoke about holistic wealth at work and 400 million people making life and death decisions at work every day globally? It also links to this as well. So not only do we have 400 million people globally making life and death decisions at work, we also have parents whose lives are being cut short earlier than they should because of stress, anxiety, depression. and because of overwork and burnout. So what we're passing down to the next generation really needs to be examined in its totality in a holistic framework. And that's what we're aiming to do today, to sensitize everyone globally, whether you're listening in from Europe, the UK, Finland, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, Canada, Singapore, wherever you're listening in today, this affects us globally. Now, it's unbelievable the shift to holistic wealth and what this can do in terms of what we pass down. Because when we talk about holistic wealth, we're talking about regulating our nervous systems as well, healing trauma, living with intention so that the next generation inherits a foundation of resilience, peace, and balance. In 2025, we're seeing a growing awareness of this. Families are waking up to the fact that money alone can't solve generational issues. A recent report from the World Health Organization found that mental health conditions are the leading cause of disability worldwide. This isn't just a global crisis, it's a generational crisis. And I'll repeat that again. A recent report from the World Health Organization found that mental health conditions are the leading cause of disability worldwide. Holistic wealth gives us a roadmap for change. It's about integrating financial planning with emotional well-being. It's about prioritizing health over hustle. It's about teaching our children not just how to save money and financial literacy, but how to save themselves from cycle of burnout and trauma, and how not to then pass that back down to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So I'm going to get into part 2, where we talk about the financial aspects of generational wealth. And so that has been an important part of the conversation, the financial piece, for decades. In 2025, though, we want to expand that and go past that. So let's just talk about the financial piece. Here's a critical statistic. Only 30% of generational wealth is successfully transferred to the second generation. And by the third generation, a staggering 90% of that wealth is often gone. So listen to this. By the third generation, a staggering 90% of that wealth that was passed down is gone, is wiped out. And I remember there's a stat about that in the Holistic Wealth Expanded and Updated book, where I talk about that as well. Because what we need to realize is that we need to put in the work, not only of passing down core assets and figuring out tax advantages and how we're going to implement tax strategies, but how those generations inheriting that wealth will know how to actually keep it. And that's the part of wealth that's often not talked about. And as a behavioral economist that has been doing this work in my professional life for over 25 years, it's something that as a behavioral economist, I feel a responsibility to talk about. Why does this happen though? Why is it that by the third generation, a staggering 90% of that wealth is often gone? Number 1, poor financial planning. Number 2, a lack of communication between generations. And guess what? Our money should be driven by values. We need to communicate those values to the next generation. So if I know that I had saved, I worked hard, I didn't engage in activities and overspending, we should pass on core money values to the next generation. Let them understand how this wealth came to be and how the value should drive the growth of that wealth well into the future. So because we fail to pass down the tools for emotional resilience as well, healthy money habits, healthy money mindset, and a broader definition of wealth, that generation, by the third generation, 90% of that wealth is gone because we have been failing to pass down all of these tenets of holistic wealth. And that's why holistic wealth is the new generational wealth, because we need to figure out how we're doing this so that it will last longer than the third generation. If it's wiped out, if 90% is wiped out by the third generation, we have a serious problem right here. So safeguarding and enhancing traditional generational wealth while addressing the intangible assets that are just as important, emotional well-being, mental health, spiritual alignment and spiritual health, then with these building blocks, we're better able to preserve wealth. So when we talk about the financial side of holistic wealth and safeguarding those financial assets, because that financial side is still a cornerstone of generational wealth, here are some key financial strategies that families must adopt. Estate planning. Let's talk a bit about estate planning. Ensuring that assets are protected with wills, trusts, and powers of attorney. A 2022 survey found that 67% of Americans don't have a formal estate plan in place, leaving their families vulnerable to legal battles and financial losses. So again, a 2022 survey found that 67% of Americans don't have a formal estate plan in place. So that needs to be in place and that needs to be done. And you need to talk to your legal team about what kind of trusts are available that suits your family situation best, whether it's a testamentary trust, other kinds of trusts. You need to put things in place. And of course, having a will and letting your loved ones know. Okay, number 2, financial literacy. According to the National Endowment for Financial Education, 88% of adults say they never received financial education in school. 88% of adults say they never received financial education in school. So passing down financial literacy, teaching children how to budget, save, invest is essential to preserving wealth. So teaching our teens, teaching our kids how to save, invest is powerful. Tax planning. Generational wealth cannot be eroded. Generational wealth can be eroded by taxes. Use tools like irrevocable trusts or gifting strategies to minimize your tax liabilities. When you're looking on passing down assets, this is critical. Insurance and asset protection. When we talk about financial resilience, this is key. Life insurance, umbrella policies, business succession planning. If you're an entrepreneur, and a lot of our listeners are business people, ensure that unforeseen circumstances don't deplete your assets. But here's the catch. Even with all of these safeguards in place, if the emotional and mental tools aren't there, the wealth will not and cannot survive past you. So even with all of those tools, if the mental health and emotional tools aren't there, then the wealth will not and cannot survive. So nervous system regulation is often the hidden key to wealth preservation. Nervous system regulation and what we're passing down is the hidden key to wealth preservation. Generational trauma passed down unconsciously often manifests as poor money habits, fear of scarcity, or a need to overspend to fill emotional voids. These are all signs of nervous system dysregulation. A groundbreaking study in 2020 from the Harvard Center on the Developing Child found that chronic stress in parents reshapes how their children's brains develop, leading to higher levels of cortisol and a tendency towards stress-driven behaviors. And of course, money is a big part of that in adulthood. That stress-driven behaviors like spending, overspending is a stress-driven behavior. So we're seeing the effects of this in families who pass down financial wealth, but also pass down cycles of stress, burnout, mismanagement. Holistic wealth is the bridge between financial and the emotional legacy. So I'll repeat that again. Holistic wealth is the bridge between financial and emotional legacy. So what does this mean? What does holistic wealth do differently? It ensures that the financial aspects of generational wealth are paired with the tools for emotional and mental stability. And here's why it works. It works because number one, as I outlined in my book, Holistic Wealth, your financial identity is key. Each person has a financial identity, a unique way they approach money. Understanding and embracing this helps families avoid financial conflicts, and it creates stronger, more cohesive wealth strategies. It fosters empathy, and it fosters the conversation around money and wealth preservation. I know that my mom, for example, is not a risk taker. She's actually an anxious spender. So when she goes to pass down her legacy, I know that for her, it never came easy. She was actually a child who suffered from epilepsy 5 years during her life, never went to school for those 5 years, and watched her parents spend every dime on her health. Some of her siblings couldn't even go to school because of her. So she grew up with a lot of guilt around money and what her parents had to do for her. So, she has that money tendency, which is the anxious spender profile. And if you do take the personal financial identities quiz on the Institute on Holistic Wealth, then you'll see what your financial identity is. But having said that, what I'm trying to state is, having known that my mother is an anxious spender, when she passes down her assets, I'm going to know the values around her assets, the values around everything that she's generated, all the wealth that she's accumulated in her lifetime, and I'm going to treat it with care. And that's what I'm saying. We all need to know our personal financial identities for understanding, embracing this, and empathy, and for wealth preservation. Number 2, emotional intelligence around money. Instead of passing down fear or scarcity mindsets, families can pass down emotional intelligence, teaching the next generation how to make decisions aligned with their values. I mean, we can pass down scarcity mindsets, and we can also pass down overspending. We can also pass down unhealthy money mindsets. We can also pass down that comparison gene where we feel the itch to compare with everyone else, the cars we drive, the kinds of houses we live in, the neighborhoods, or titles at work. And before you know it, all of that wealth is gone through the window by the third generation, competing with somebody else, competing with the Joneses. And that's what I'm saying. This is why the very first episode of this podcast is this topic, because I want us going into 2025 cognizant of this, of what we're passing down. Number 3, nervous system regulation practices. Incorporate mindfulness, meditation, stress reduction practices into your family routines. Now, the Holistic Healing Certification Program on the Institute on Holistic Wealth website has a slew of these practices that you can learn, pass down, do together as a family. And if you feel that money trauma has been passed down in your family, check out the Money Trauma Certification Program there as well. Now, statistics prove that what I'm saying works. The statistics are there to back it up, folks. Families that include emotional well-being in their wealth strategies report a 32% higher level of wealth retention across generation. And the source of this is the Family Enterprise Research Conference 2023. So I'll say that again. Families that include emotional well-being in their wealth strategies report a 32% higher level of wealth retention across generations, right? And that's what we want. We want a higher level of wealth retention across generations. In addition, in households practicing mindfulness and financial education, children are 45% more likely to retain and grow their inheritance. And the source for that stat is the Journal of Financial Counseling and Planning 2023. So I repeat that stat again. Households practicing mindfulness, financial education, children are 45% more likely to retain and grow their inheritance, because we don't want just wealth retention. We want growth as well, right? For the generations to come. So holistic wealth is a proven path to creating not just financial legacies, but resilient legacies. And when we talk about financial resilience, we're also talking about resilient legacies. We want those legacies passed down to be resilient, right? So that's also a huge piece. So here are some practical steps to embrace holistic wealth in 2025. Start early. Have open conversations about money, as well as money trauma and values with your family. Introduce these topics as early as possible. Talk about previous generations and what they went through. The Holistic Wealth podcast, for instance, has so many podcast episodes where people talk about their financial identities, and they talk about how their ancestors lived through World War II, World War I, slavery, these big, large socioeconomic global events that created huge amounts of money trauma. Go through these episodes, talk about it with your friends, your family members, and really think about how money trauma or any trauma in general is passed down in your family. Number 2, invest in financial and emotional education. Take courses, read books. The Institute, as I said, has a certified holistic wealth consultant program and the trauma of money program. Equip your family with tools for both financial success and emotional regulation. Integrate nervous system practices into family life. So create family traditions around mindfulness, gratitude, and even breath work. These practices help calm your nervous system and create a foundation for wise decision making. Because when you have a dysregulated nervous system, you can't make wise decisions. And so there was a previous episode on holistic wealth at home. Go through that episode. Figure out how you can build holistic wealth at home. Create a holistic wealth section in your home where you can integrate these practices like your mindfulness, your meditation, your calming exercises, and even with your kids and teens. Build an ethical and sustainable portfolio. When we talk about building a holistic wealth portfolio, that's something that the Institute on Holistic Wealth can also help you to do because it needs to align with your values. And it needs to be financially resilient and it needs to be legacy resilient. So holistic wealth isn't just a buzzword. It's the future of generational planning. It combines the financial safeguards of traditional generational wealth with tools for emotional, mental, and spiritual resilience. Let's make 2025 the year we redefine legacy. So we're not just only redefining wealth, we're redefining legacy. And it's amazing that we're talking about legacy in the first week of 2025. Let's think about redefining legacy. Let's leave behind more than just money or think about money. Let's leave behind a roadmap for living well and for thriving. And that's what this holistic wealth movement is about. If you loved this episode, please share it with your friends, family, or anyone looking to create a meaningful legacy. This is a great episode to kickstart the year with. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and join us on this journey. On April 9th, 2025, we celebrate Global Holistic Wealth Day around the world. Please add it to your calendars right now. Celebrate it at home, celebrate it at work, celebrate it in your communities, celebrate it with your families, add it to your calendar, and please celebrate it on social media. Thank you so much for listening into the Holistic Wealth Podcast. Here's to living intentionally and building true holistic wealth in 2025 and beyond. Love you all. Happy New Year again. All the best to you and your loved ones. Lots of love from the Holistic Wealth Podcast.
The Holistic Wealth Podcast with Keisha Blair is brought to you by. Have you joined the Institute on Holistic Wealth? If you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Choose your membership plan at the Institute on Holistic Wealth/memberships to join. As a member, you'll get access to free worksheets, advice, coaching, and an intentional design workshop. As you start to live a more holistically wealthy lifestyle, you'll want to stay for a very long time. So go to Institute on Holistic Wealth/memberships to join. If you haven't read the book yet, pick up a copy of the award-winning best-selling Holistic Wealth 36 Life Lessons to help you recover from disruption, find your life purpose, and achieve financial freedom.